All this is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. Today we have our own Paul going to discuss about some vaccines and stats as well. So Paul, please take it away.
Thank you very much. The title here is that is settled on is CDC is cogitating on COVID vaccines. And not only does the cogitating sound nice and a little clickbaity, but I thought if I say that they're thinking about it, that's perhaps an overstatement because the CDC has new leadership and this meeting took place and it is their Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP. And so we'll talk about what it's doing, but I wanted to sort of back off a little to say that they're thinking about it or recommending or something, and they are intellectually engaged, but I think cogitating is kind of at the right level that they're sort of thinking about it or whatever. So anyway, that's what we're having going through. And the here we go. And so what I want to show you is where to get this, and you can go look at it yourself. It's all there. And so right here, and CDC Gov, right here, this is the URL for it. It doesn't have www in the front of it. And so I would suggest probably that you may not be able to get it that way because it's probably rather than being on the web for everyone, this is sort of it's available, but it's focused on the participants. There's a number of things they did that show that this is not very well thought through, not very well refined as I would like to have refined if I were making the presentation. So we start from this one, the CDC Gov, and this is just, I put in a Word box and just made this larger. So it's the same thing up there. And then I go to the draft meeting agenda. And on the draft meeting agenda, they're talking about a lot of different things. And 11:30, they did COVID, and they went through. So all the slides that I'm talking about were things presented to this group on a couple hours right around lunchtime. And you go down, if you're searching it, and you'll see a page that looks a lot like this. And then we have the introduction, Moderna, epidemiology, vaccine effectiveness, and the considerations they have. And this 1283 is a new mRNA vaccine that they're working on. And what they've done, I'll show you a little later, they're combining some antigens along with the spike and linking them together. And they think that it'll be different. And they've done some testing, which we will talk a little more about. As always, the green arrows and the blue circles are mine. And I took stuff from their slides, but almost all the words are their slides. And so the policy options they gave them on the annual COVID were just these three. Maintain what they have, do risk-based for people of increased risk of severe COVID. Put a circle around it because later on, they talk about what they counted as increased risk. And I think they may have played with it sort of like they do p-hacking. I think they played with it to try to get the results that they wanted to show that the vaccine was a little better. And I think they dropped some things out that we might consider severe and should have been put together. But again, they're defining increased risk of severe COVID that they're talking about is defined. So this term looks like it's just an ordinary term or an ordinary medical term, but it's something that they're defining quite precisely, and we'll show you that later on. And I added option 4 that if I were doing it, we just sort of include maybe we don't need vaccines anymore, but that was not an option that they even had on the table to present to their talking group. And now let's look at the risk of higher COVID-19. And you see, here they have all of the risk of higher ones, and the guys that have the little red boxes are the ones that they had. Those are the ones they dropped out and didn't count. And right here, you may see Nancy. Now, these aren't women named Nancy. It said pregnancy on the prior slide I didn't show you. And when they brought it over, they dropped the first little bit. So pregnancy became Nancy. Maybe there's some sort of inner joke going on among the group, but I think it was just happenstance. But you see disabilities, including Down syndrome, those are excluded. Physical inactivity is excluded. Parkinson's disease is excluded, but dementia is included. People who use steroids or other immunization suppressions, they're not included as being at higher risk of severe COVID. I have no idea why. And as I'm thinking about it, then later I see that they were talking about things, and I think they probably did the equivalent of p-hacking, of just changing it around to get a better result. And then it's like, oh, these have to be in, these have to be out, because the numbers go up a little. Maybe I'm completely wrong. That's what it seemed like to me. I didn't see whatever reason for it. And so other people who are above 65 are considered at risk, and people whose age is less than 6 months who are already moderate or severely immunocompromised. So if we go up here, those were included, but just using them, if you're not under 6 months, then it doesn't count. If you are over 6 months, then it does count. And so again, and if you're over 65, it counts everyone. And so maybe that's why Parkinson's was put out, because it only, I think it affects people, a lot more people than just those over 65. But regardless.
Sorry. In your next slide, is that less than 6 months or equal or greater than 6 months?
It's great. It looks like it's greater than. Yeah.
Okay.
I misread it. Very good. So estimates of adults in the U.S. with at least one condition that puts them at higher risk for it. And you can see that these numbers are pretty high. 18 going all the way up to greater than 75, which 86%. So once you hit about 50, about 80% of the population. And if you look at everyone less than 18, it's 74. So the higher population is here. So it looks like whatever is causing these severe illness conditions, less than 18 is a little less than the above 50. And then the ones 18 to 50 are lower risk. So it looks like we're not getting America healthier as time goes by.
That's actually surprising. 18 to 29 years of age, 67% of us have at least one condition that puts us at higher risk of severe illness.
Right. And keep in mind, physical inactivity is not one of those. So if you add physical inactivity, the number has to be higher.
Okay. Sure. I'm sure that allergies and asthma must be included in this age.
Well, if we go back, asthma's right here.
Yeah, that must be.
Cancer's here.
Yeah. Cerebrovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, lung diseases. Yeah, must be lung diseases, asthma, type 1 diabetes, maybe HIV as well. Mental health conditions, mood disorders, depressions, schizophrenia. That's, I don't know why that puts them at a higher risk, but I understand. At least they have this list.
That's why I thought they might be p-hacking.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the weekly rates of respiratory virus-associated hospitalization in the U.S. for 0 to 17. And this gives us a comparison of COVID right there, COVID the year before, this one. And you've got influenza, RSV, and two different times, and influenza 2 different times. And you can see the seasonality of RSV and influenza is not shown at all by COVID. COVID tends to be more or less fairly stable. And you can see almost the whole year, it's lower than it was the year before, which might cause someone to say, we don't need vaccination anymore, but that's not an option that was presented. And here's the total number of COVID deaths. Look, it ends in August 24. I wonder why. Oh, it might be that they're getting final numbers and not just using provisional numbers. Actually, no, they're using provisional data. And it was accessed in January. Really? They're preparing the slides. They got them after the election, but before the president was installed, and they pulled this data together and they haven't updated it because I don't know.
That's so strange.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is sort of like Nancy. It looks to me like at best it's just an obvious error that shouldn't occur in a junior high or high school presentation, let alone in something that's presenting to CDC and doctors that are volunteering their time to help the nation out. But
And through this vehicle, almost whole world. I know that my friends in Pakistan, they follow CDC and FDA's recommendations.
well, if you want to undermine them, you can point out that they're doing some pretty strange stuff here.
Yeah.
Here's a total number of influenza and COVID deaths among 0 to 7. And you can see influenza is here. COVID is less than 1-year-olds get hit 2.5 times harder with COVID. 1 to 4, it's a third or 2/3 to, as much for influenza. And we go 5 to 17, it's more than 2 to 1, almost 3 to 1. So it's about a third here, 2/3, and it's twice. So COVID and deaths are much, much harder on the very, very young. And then as people get up to age 5, it becomes about a third as much.
That's interesting.
So if you're raising kids and you're worried about, if they have COVID or influenza, there's a total number of deaths for a year in the United States going up to August, because I think that's when the deaths stopped looking in August, and they got the slides done and they weren't going to revisit them. But basically, not very many die, but you can see almost as many less than 1-year-olds die as the whole 5 to 17 from COVID. So if you look at the population, these are total number of deaths here. But still, it tells you that if you're worried about COVID, you should be more worried about influenza for the little ones. Let me know if there's any questions. This is the infection-induced SARS-CoV seroprevalence. And so this goes up to 22 before the vaccines. And you can see right here in the little circle I have, 93% of the people already had immunity before the vaccines came out in the 12 to 17, I think. No.
That is amazing and interesting. So November and December 2022?
Yes. They didn't say a word about it. And we're doing the vaccines. We have the heart issues, and there was no need for it at all. No medical benefit. And we just harmed the people.
This is a very interesting graph.
This was not shared at the time.
Yeah.
And look here, even for the less than 1-year-olds, everyone got COVID. They already had it.
Yeah.
Those that didn't know they had it were just had a light dose, but they had the antibiotics.
That is such an interesting thing. So November, December 2022, by that time, 93% of these are 5 to 11?
The top is the 12 to 17.
93% of them were seropositive. That means a lot of them must have been asymptomatic as well.
Look at this, September 21, almost half already.
That's very interesting.
The kids are amazing disease vectors. They catch everything.
Yeah, they do.
They pass it along. So the whole response, and this is what we should go look at, regardless of how bad we did or how good we did it before. This is what we should be using to get ready for the next one. Say, hey, maybe want to go check these people and see, if you could have taken the doses, and we were limiting and rationing the doses, if you remember doing it, and say, half the kids don't need it. Get them out of the line, if nothing else.
Correct.
When I saw this, I had the same reaction you did. And this is infection. They're saying this is infection. Why was this not shared as the disease was going forward?
Yeah.
I can't give you a good answer.
I never came across these numbers. You know that I was doing at least 2 talks every day for 3-4 years.
Right.
I never saw
you never saw these. No one came to you and said, oh, Mubin, you missed this. Look at this slide.
Yeah, never.
Here we show, this is the combined infections and vaccination from December 21 to December 23 from US blood donors greater than 16, okay? I don't know why they have this little dotted line here. Maybe that is supposedly supposed to say that it's effective there, and it's below it isn't effective. Anyway,
Right.
these are the number of cumulative infections and vaccinations, up to 7+. So they're saying, this is what happens as the number of goes up. And so this is a log scale. And so each one of these is a 10-fold increase. If you put it on a regular graph, it would just go off the paper on one end or the other. So that's why they do this. And you can see their error bars. But this is showing that if this is the supposed thing, they're trying to show, oh, you've got to get 7 exposures before you reach this purple blue line, whatever the heck that means.
So they're saying a high number of cumulative SARS-CoV-2 infections and COVID-19 vaccinations leads to higher antibody levels, but with smaller incremental increases in antibodies with each exposure. Now,
Right.
I have a quick comment to make here, and I've been saying this for 4 or 5 years. It is not necessary that antibodies have to be circulating all the time in our blood to prove that we have immunity. If somebody got infected and was okay, then they proved that they got infected and they were okay. Their memory cells can go to rest after 3-4 months and not actively produce a lot of antibodies. So I do not know why they keep measuring antibodies.
And it's supposed to do that. And so here, all this is showing is if you keep agitating it, you get higher antibodies levels. Okay, but it doesn't say that that's any more protection. And why do they have this little subtle line going across? I think they're trying to show people that you got to get 7 before you're good. And I don't know that this concentration is of any importance at all.
Yeah, so for me, it was very simple. I understand that there was a group of people who, when become exposed to COVID-19, will not be able to handle the symptoms because of their comorbidities, age, their frailty, etc. And then there are people who got infected and recovered, and now they have antibodies and they showed that they have recovered. Why are we going after them to say, no, you got to have the vaccine as well?
And I think you can go back, at least for me, the basic medicine is a vaccination is to approximate and be somewhat similar to an infection. You're trying to simulate an infection without the downside of the disease. But the immunity is to try to be somewhat the same as an infection. If you've had an infection and gotten over it, a vaccination is just, doing 30, 80% of what the infection did.
And also this is fair to say that, hey, somebody who has not gotten infected, we do not know what would be the downside of the infection to them. So sure, we are looking at the vaccine. But someone who got infected and recovered and is now running around going back to trying to go back to their work or do other stuffs, they have proven that they're fine.
Right.
And
Or
so,
take myself, because we don't want to talk about other people. I've had COVID 5 times, lived through each one of them. Each one has been less severe. Why would I take any medical risk
correct.
to build it up?
Even if it is a rare risk.
If I had cancer and they killed all my immune system, that's different. But as long as I'm still functioning essentially the same way, it's like, I'm already up here with just this. And I did get the vaccine and I got a booster. So I guess I'm this curve right here. But now it's been a long time, so my curve may be down to 0 or something. That's fine. They had a slide talking about long COVID, significant public health threat. Well, I haven't heard him say that before. Have you heard that long COVID is a significant public health threat?
Yeah.
National surveys in 2023. What? They haven't updated the numbers for the significant public health threat, they haven't, I'm telling you the numbers in 2 years.
What were
That
they
doesn't
doing?
sound very good. How much money are they spending?
Yeah.
Anyway, they estimated 9.2 million adults and 0.3 children. They don't tell us what a child is, but okay. I think it's less than 18 because they have it here, but it's not clear. Okay. And why are we not seeing the numbers? Wouldn't it be really good to know if in 2025 we had 9.0 or 9.5? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Is this going to go away in 5 years if we leave it alone? Is it going to become worse? I mean,
Yeah, that's actually a very, very important point, because in some cases of long COVID, we see that even if the patient is not able to get any medical help, they gradually become better. And in some cases, they continue to become worse. And I saw a UK study where they were saying that over the years, some people who had the long COVID, they continued to become healed. And then there were more who had long COVID. So there was a sustained number, not increasing or reducing. Here
right.
we are US. We
And there
should
was
have this data.
that we should have it. They have it probably. They just haven't opened the vault. Where's the 2024 data? Where's the 2020 data or 2021? Again, is the number increasing or decreasing? They agree it's a significant public health threat. And we get one data point?
Yeah.
That's insane to me. And this is what they're giving the doctors to try to recommend that, you know, I just can't understand that. And so I do remember that there was a study in someplace that I presented as one of my statistics that showed inferring, doing whatever with the numbers when the COVID concentration was down, and we had estimates in England about the number of long COVID, and we had like a month with them down, and it looked like maybe we had a 10% reduction or something. But again, nobody has published it. That number, the information has to be out there. So anyway, it says here, among adults greater than 18, 3.6 prevented long COVID symptoms, and 8.4 reported ever having long COVID. My understanding from what's his name? The guy in England that did all the data, that he said about 10% of the people would get long COVID. And so here we're getting a number that's about a third of that. And the difference may be how what they're recording for it. Because if you remember, the definitions were different in how long after you had COVID before it was long COVID, and whether you couldn't get out of bed or whether it affected a serious thing or whatever. Right. So the difference may not be a threefold difference in the real impact. It may just be a definitional interest.
And there was another important part of this whole data, and that was that various variants were producing a different rate of long COVID. And because of that, it is important to keep tracking it all the way now and even after. Anyways.
Right. And you see here, they're saying children 0 to 17, they had about a tenth of the rate of long COVID and about a fourth of the rate of ever having long COVID. But 3 out of 5 adults, or 60%, report activity limitations continuing, and 80% of the children report activity limitations continuing. So this would say if you're working on long COVID and you're trying to address it as a national thing, perhaps children are more of a focus than adults, because it seems like more adults are getting well than children.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. I am a little embarrassed as much as surprised that this is 2023 data. I never saw this.
No.
The studies that I saw were the Veterans Affairs studies that showed anywhere from 17% and above. Then some studies from the other countries that showed even 30% or more of the long COVID. And as with the repeated infection, the risk of long COVID increased. And with the presence of vaccines, the long COVID still occurred, but the risk reduced a little. These are the studies that I had discussed.
right? And here they're saying that this is just what you said. Vaccination had less COVID, but they're talking about the data here isn't the 2023, it's 2021 and 2022. Apparently there is no 2023 data, because they would want to put the data on the same time frame, but
I've
apparently
started doubting it with CDC's work.
this is not something the CDC either can do or wants to do, or maybe the results weren't as good as they thought. I don't know. But looking at this, I'm just not overly favorably impressed. Let's go to this one. They have a little graph here showing the unvaccinated here. This is in the pre-Delta, this is the Delta, and this is the Omicron. And they're showing the incidence of long COVID. Boom, boom, boom. Look, 10%. Just what we heard. Then it's down a little, then it's down a little. Oh, the vaccinated group. It was down here and down here. And here are the percentages. And you can see they're reporting that it's significantly lower for the vaccinated. There is another real problem here, is this is not a random study. The people who were first vaccinated were the healthcare workers who probably already had 1, 2, 3, 5 minor infections, because they're keeping their health up. They're getting a very minor hit of it and going forward. And just like school teachers or whatever, they were exposed on the front line working hard. And so they got the vaccination. So this step down may actually just be that they, those that had long COVID, like some of your guests were already dropped out of the system and weren't counted in this or something. I don't know. But when I see this, it's like there was a world of difference between those that were being vaccinated and those that weren't. Remember when Biden was a candidate, he got his first vaccination beforehand because he was old in Delaware and they were giving him out. And so again, it wasn't randomly distributed. They didn't pull a number out like we did with drafting or something and say, you got number 216, stand in line here. No. This has nothing to do with a randomized study. And I think drawing these lines and trying to draw these conclusions, while statistically this is probably accurate, I didn't measure it, but it looks accurate and it probably is. Trying to draw medical conclusions from this, I think it's garbage in, garbage out. You don't have the right groups to measure. And you can show that from this decrease here is probably right, this decrease and this decrease is probably right, but comparing the unvaccinated to the vaccinated as if that was the only difference is probably wrong.
That is true, because in some cases we discuss this, and I think nobody would challenge this, that in the beginning vaccinations were given to more at risk for a specific age group, etc., which were more at risk, and so their comorbidities were present and they could have developed more long COVID. And those who got vaccinated afterwards, they were actually healthier. So now, I hope that they did some adjustments and stratifications and then came up with the data and not just randomly.
Well, they certainly had sufficient time after they collected the data to do the analysis needed.
Correct. I mean, they should have stratified and adjusted. I hope they did.
Well, but I would have hoped that some of the other errors we talked about wouldn't have occurred here. So I don't know how confident I am that they did what they should have done here either. They probably did. Let me just start. They probably did. Everything's probably just fine with that. But that I would question. And if I were trying to make a policy decision based on this difference, I would really want to get into what corrections they made, what corrections should be done or should be done differently, and take a look at how different these lines are, if they really are different.
Correct. I would have loved to have data, for example, like this. Somebody who's 50 years of age, male, these comorbidities or no comorbidities, and then they're vaccinated versus they're not vaccinated, and here is their difference.
Or if you have people who were signed up to be vaccinated and they couldn't be vaccinated because there was a snowstorm and they got removed, now you have the same selection criteria and you go forward. So I'm sure there are cases like that they could look at. Okay, now this is the multi-symptom inflammatory syndrome in children. This is where they're trying to relabel long COVID to try to make it different.
Understood. Just a quick response to Cynthia. Cynthia says it's possible the links will be added after the program. Yes, Cynthia. So normally it takes about 24 hours that YouTube doesn't let me edit much, but I'll get the link and I'll put that in the description and save it. So it would appear in the description. I do not know exactly how many hours later.
Okay, so here they're showing that the number of kids that have this going from pre-Delta, Delta, Omicron. Now, why the numbers were right justified rather than left? Anyway, I don't know why you would put, anyway. Again, it's one of those things that just doesn't add confidence that, why they did that.
This is really bad. I was talking with someone, younger student who had left aligned the numbers. And I was saying, this is not good. We have to do the right alignment of the numbers, not left. How could is this real genuine CDC slide or somebody?
The slide that got edited. Some of these things I was going to comment on, but I thought clearly 100 people should read this before they bring it. And this is the way it finally came out. This is it.
That's sad.
Now, let me explain what I did. Is I took the CDC slides and I cut the middle out. So the little footer they had and maybe a thing on the top is gone, but I'm trying to go through quickly and just take the guts. But I didn't create anything. I just cut off stuff that I thought would be distracting.
Understood.
And it makes the image bigger.
So it is them. We have not.
I did not realign the columns, no.
I guess if you had realigned, you would have actually helped the situation.
Yes. And look at the VAERS system. We've been talking about it and how hard it is. Look how many verified cases they have. In 2 years, 4 cases total. That's it.
What are these 4 vaccine adverse events?
Yeah, this is verified cases. There are only 4 verified cases. You were telling us that you thought that it was a failed system. I think this data shows it is a failed system. We could argue if it was 1,000 or 20,000 or 50, but 4?
Yeah.
No.
Interesting.
They're similar to the expected background rates of less than 2 cases per million doses. That's because this system rejects and doesn't allow it. I mean, that's the only reason why.
Yeah, even if it is lesser than 2 cases per million doses, we are about 300 million people. And if everybody got, let's say even half of us got 2 or 3 doses, and then you take lesser than 2 per million doses, that's a lot of
look at these rates. If this were 2, you multiply it by 10 and then multiply it by a half. And so this number should be 15.
Yeah.
So it's telling us that the system came together to defend the vaccines and kicked out even more people than they normally do.
This almost looks like a sabotage of the data. Maybe somebody look at the alignment for the reporting rate. I'm so sorry. Now that you've pointed out the alignment, anyway, sorry, we can continue.
Yeah, they centered it and then they didn't put a 0.00. You see, this is the problem, is they don't really understand numbers and how to use them. Verified case 0, the reporting rate is still 0.00. You calculate it. It isn't just the number goes away because you didn't have any. It still should be calculated and reported to the same number of significant digits. I mean, this is an error that in my engineering school, a freshman in college would get whatever, let alone a PhD student. But anyway, it gets worse.
Don't tell me it gets worse.
Look at this slide. Look at what they're doing. Child that has 1+, are they not sure? Definitely will get vaccinated, probably won't, whatever. And look at this. Child received COVID vaccine since. So we have 6 things, 5 of which are whether they're likely, and 1 of which is the child received a vaccine since So see this one right here, 26?
Hmm.
It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with what they're charting. Nothing at all to do with it.
Child had 1+ dose. Then they say child received a COVID-19 vaccine since August 22.
Well, maybe there's a theoretical reason. Look, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's only 5 here. There's 6 there. This category shouldn't be there.
So I am gaslighting myself to say, no, it is something I don't understand. Maybe their uber minds, the PhDs and smarts actually did the right thing, and we are stuck with trying to understand it. Is it
If
above our
that's
pay
true,
grade?
I don't have a clue what they might be trying to do.
Very interesting. Meaning, as much as it is interesting, it is sad if this is what's happening. Calling pregnancy Nancy, not aligning the numbers, then the numbers not making sense. It's just strange.
Well, maybe everything else that we don't see, that we don't know is right or wrong, they got that all right. That could be.
Maybe. Maybe I'll have to go with you.
Who knows? There's no way we could. Okay, when they were polled, the work group supported all non-universal policy decisions. Look at the support here. They did it over time because they're trying to hammer this group into consensus, because they go and they poll them and they then say, the poll was this way. Oh, here's a poll a little later. Here's a poll a little later asking the same questions, trying to say you're an outlier. You're an outlier. You get thrown out if you don't agree with everybody else. We're showing you the direction. You know, my finger is on option A. You want to pick option A. They're doing that. But, and this is kind of interesting. Look at it. But look at how they worded this one. Do you support allowance for anyone who wants protection from vaccine? Like the government has 100% control over the vaccine you take or don't take. CDC is going to say you can't get it. We're standing between you and the doctor. And if the doctor thinks you need the vaccine and CDC doesn't agree, we're going to say no. And remember, they went to the Court of Appeals and said, we can't stand between a doctor. We have no authority to stand between a doctor and a patient. Isn't that how that reads to you, that last area? That they're going to allow anyone wanting protection to get a vaccine?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm overly sensitive, but that's how it struck me, that they're way into this government control stuff. So anyway, but they're showing a high consensus, and look at the options they have. Specific high groups get it. Certain age group get it. Allowance for anyone who asks for it. Where's the no vaccine option? It isn't here.
Yeah.
You can't even think that. Seems like the group think in 1984 comes to mind, but anyway, I may be biased. Now look here, they have the effectiveness of the COVID-19 against emergency department and urgent care. Remember when 60% efficacy was the threshold of the vaccine, and if it was less than 60%, it was completely unusable, couldn't be done. Trump is wrong. He can't get a vaccine. It's got to be more effective than 60% or it's wasted. It's useless. Well,
I remember that. Yeah.
That's 60%. And these are the numbers that we have in 2024 and 2025 for this vaccine against emergency department and urgent care encounters.
Yeah, I think that it went this way, that first they said there'll be no transmission. They said that the efficacy would be better than 60%, and that is when the vaccine will become approved. Then as the, I kept saying that this is a respiratory virus, and it cannot be stopped from launching in our mouth, landing in our mouth or nose or on our conjunctiva. So saying that somehow the vaccine is going to put a mask in front of us, that's not going to happen. I think, Paul, you probably remember that I used to say this. And so what they did was they then said, well, it's not about the transmission. It's more about the severe infection and the severe outcomes.
Right.
So that is how
this one
we
is the emergency department visits, but you're right. And it can... logically, is since having an infectious agent inside your body is being infected, it logically can never reduce the infection rate. And I remember an interview in, I think it was a Scandinavian at the EU, and they had one of the business guys, and they were pushing hard to figure out how much money they paid, and they weren't getting that. But he said, what about the effectiveness of this? He said, we never measured that. It was never a criteria. Not only saying that it didn't work, it's like we never even looked at it. We were not asked to look at the efficacy. Well, here we can see
So this is the effectiveness against emergency department urgent care encounters.
From 24 and 25. So this is up to date. And we have the different age groups, but you can see nobody is approaching 60%. If you moved over an extra error bar, you would just be touching it with your error bar. Except for this one. Here we go against hospitalizations. There's your 60%. Hey, some of the error bars, just barely. But it's not 60%. It's 55%. Maybe if you got vaccinated 60 to 120 days earlier.
And Denise is saying, I think that was England, Paul. So,
okay, you may be right. And here it is against hospitalization among immunocompromised, and it's still not 60%.
Interesting. Almost same as the others.
Almost. Here they have the percent vaccinated for the population for 6 months to 17 months. It's showing last year in green, or last year in blue, this year in green, and it's about the same and maybe a little lower.
I thought
it's below 20%.
We were vaccinating everyone. This is a very low percentage.
Yeah, 18%.
Interesting. I thought we were overall more than 85% vaccinated. And one dose at least was like 93% vaccinated.
This is starting vaccinated this year. The 80% is ever vaccinated.
Oh, wow.
You use the same words, you change it, and then everyone thinks, oh, everyone's adopting the vaccine. We're all doing good. No, actually, everyone is rejecting the vaccine.
That's very
Again,
interesting.
not everyone, but this is showing that a whole year later, you only got 18%. And how many of these people had to be vaccinated for their job? Was that half of this group?
Could it be that they were vaccinated before the beginning of this
the number
year?
starts at 0 for the year. And goes up. This is not.
Okay, this data is driving me crazy.
If this were just the people, you would have the curve come down because we're having less vaccination over time, and as people age out, the new people coming in are not getting. So the fact that coming up tells you that it's number getting vaccinated this year, and it's less. It's 18%. And when I go into Walmart and some other stores, some people have masks and some don't. And in talking to some, I asked them, what, if you don't mind, why are you wearing a mask? I said, oh, the store has a rule. If I don't get vaccinated, I have to wear a mask. If I get vaccinated, I don't. And so what percentage of these are folks that are like that are told they have to? Or the U.S. military, they're being told they have to. You remember the big fight they had with the military and they threw people out?
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
The reason for that is they have a statute that says military people have to take approved medications if prescribed to them.
So I have a question and a comment.
The SARS vaccine wasn't approved. It was emergency. So they had, for the first time, if your group tells you to take something, you can tell them no because it's emergency. And guess what? A lot of soldiers said, I can say no. For the first time, I'll say no. Anyway, now that has passed, and we have it approved, now the soldiers have to take it. And so which percentage of these are soldiers? I have no idea.
So Cynthia says, perhaps a summary at the end to tie the data together. Sorry for adding to your word.
We'll do a quick review.
Mhm.
So, and here's the same data for 18 and older. It looks like they're getting more because it stopped. So this is the latest year. This was the earlier year. Why did it start here? They didn't have the vaccine for a while. Maybe they didn't have vaccine for a while in 2024. But again, it looks like 20% is where it's peaking out.
So I really am surprised at this data, almost like I refuse to believe this data, because I thought people were let go from their jobs, they were not allowed to work together with others, and they were asked to go take vaccines. And because of that, 93% at least one dose, and more than 84% for the whole US. This data is very different. I still keep thinking that this may be that they had a vaccine before, and we are only saying in 24 did they get another vaccine.
Yes, that's what this is. That is exactly what this is. This is, did they get a vaccine this year?
Okay, so they may have been vaccinated before. For example, I got vaccinated in 2022, I believe, when the vaccines came out, but I didn't get another dose in 24. So I will not be counted here.
Right, but you'll be in the white space up above the line. You won't be below unless you get another vaccine.
Understood.
That's what this data is. But it's showing that there is great reluctance to take, low uptake, I think is the term I've seen. Now they're coming up with a brand new vaccine, a brand new direction.
Oh, wow.
Here it is. They're going to have a N-terminal domain where they have this protein that has N-terminal things, and then they're going to have receptor binding domains here in the spike protein. This says receptor binding domain is in red and the terminal domain is here, but I think what they're doing is they're putting the spike and the non-spike and they're linking them together with 7 amino acids. It's a flexible linker.
Interesting.
So you're going to have these two things floating around.
Interesting.
And they say they can get 1/5 the dose, 20% of the volume of the weight as before. But wait a second, it's got 2 groups, so it weighs twice as much. So it's like 2/5. So it's like only 40%, 60% reduction, not a 80% reduction. Yeah, well.
Yeah, but what is
microgram? No, that go the other way. So if you have twice as much, so maybe it's 1/10 as high, but you have twice as many groups, so it'd be 1/5 of the weight of it. For the Spikevax is what they're looking at.
Interesting.
But you see, they're saying this is the receptor binding domain, and this is the terminal domain. And since they're using domains, my bet is they really messed it up, and this is spike, and this is terminal, and these are all antigens.
So we saw that in the spike that there is a region that binds with the ACE2 receptor, and that was the RBD. And the RBD was only a few amino acids long. Looks like they shaved the remaining spike off, just had that little part that works with the ACE2, and then put an N-terminal with it.
I thought the same, but it can't be that because look how complicated and long this string is. This is not just the receptor binding domain. This is a very long protein. It curls here and does all this stuff. Yeah, no. This one is as big as the spike protein.
Yeah, maybe they put the wrong picture in there. Because if it is a receptor binding domain, I think the receptor binding domain itself was 10, 15 amino acids or even shorter. So they would just give a tiny peptide here.
And if this is 7 amino acids and we have one that's 15, yeah, we got a lot of extra space.
Yeah, agreed. So maybe the diagram is weird.
Is the N-terminal domain. So N-terminal, my bet is this is the N proteins, the capsin ones that they're trying to do. And why would they do that? Are they trying to make it so you can't tell if someone has immunity from the vaccine or infection? This would tend to want to cancel that out. Again, I don't know. These are just thoughts I had when I'm trying to figure out what they're doing. And that's not the receptor binder domain for the spike protein. And if you're going to put it in, both of these should have antigens. If this isn't an antigen that you don't want it to bind, why would you put it there?
So I know that in the proteins there is an N terminal or nitrogenous terminal, and there is a carboxy terminal. And so N-terminal domain is that nitrogenous end of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. So it looks like what they did was they took the beginning of the spike protein, and then they trimmed all the rest of it. They shaved all the rest of that, and then they only took the N-terminal or the beginning part of the spike and the receptor binding part and kind of strung them together with these 7 amino acids and created this new vaccine.
Could be, except I think these are way too long. If you did that to the spike protein, it would be much shorter. But I don't know. I'm not an expert. But the spike protein, this looks like about as long as the spike protein, and so does this whole other half. So maybe I'm wrong, but
size of the RBD for spike. The spike protein receptor binding domain. Sorry, you can continue. I don't want to stop you.
Next, we have similar frequency of adverse events within 28 days. Their new 1283 versus the Spikevax. And see, they're using a lower dose. They have about the same population. Any adverse effect of special interest. I have no idea what the adverse effect of special interest, but that's half as much. Leading to steady discontinuance, they had 0.02% here, none. So we go forward, and 7% of those that had were medically attended. A little bit died, none died here. Serious is about the same, and all about the same, 12, but you can see 7% of the folks, there were only 12% had any adverse effect, and 7% had a doctor take a look at them. And that seems pretty high versus any.
Understood. Could I just share my screen for a quick second, just to show these? So this is the complete spike protein genetic structure, and it has the N-terminal domain, which spans from amino acid number 14 to 290, and then so that is whatever number that comes to, and the receptor binding domain goes from 306 to 527, or 319 to 541. So probably they just took these two pieces, strung them together with 7 amino acids, and they said, this is the new vaccine.
Yeah, if they did that, then that would say these whole things are about 30 times as long as this line. Could be.
Yeah, just my 2 cents. I'm going to stop sharing.
But clearly they didn't say. So maybe they explained it in something else, but you would think the slide that's talking about this, and we can probably go look the design of mRNA 1283 and probably find something there. But I did not do that. I had to cut back a lot of what they were talking about.
Understood.
So here we have 7% medically attended. And take a look. We have here the mRNA, and here we have the spike. Day 1, day 29. Look at the geometric mean concentration. And you can see that they're ending up about the same for 12 to 17. They get 30% more with the new one with 18 to 64, and over 65, they get 80% more, they say.
And this is the antibody response chart.
Right.
Understood.
But on the other hand, if you wanted to get a 80% increase, you could take like 2 vaccines, right? Double the amount. So, but they haven't looked at that for efficacy or safety. Anyway, and if we take a look here, we get over for putting them all together, they get an 80% increase supposedly day 21, 80% day 91, 70%, and 180 days. So they're pushing the new mRNA vaccine is better. See, they always have the 10 micrograms and the 50. So we're pushing that it is a smaller dose, but we have a more response. So if you have side effects, would it be more side effects? Well, we still had 7% of the folks that are medically attended. 70% of those getting vaccines go see the doctor. And we have 0.2 and 0.3 having serious medical concerns. And you see here, I put all these slides together, and this is within 7 days of the vaccination. And here we have the different effects, and we have them going all the way across: fatigue, a headache. If you had a medical procedure that you were doing that had 40% of the people get a headache and 50% of them get fatigue, and myalgia 40%, I mean, it chills 20%. Their conclusion is no safety concerns identified.
Understood. So I think that they're thinking that this is just the normal reaction to a vaccine. So that's why it's not. Did they look at it for a longer time? Did they observe people for more than 3 or 4 months?
No, the data wasn't there. And to be fair,
they do say 8.8 months of follow-up.
Yeah. I didn't see that they had similar data for that. They are, to be fair, comparing the two together, and it can be no safety concerns identified more than what is with the original mRNA vaccine, and that would make sense. And that's that I think is what they mean, not that this would be acceptable for a vaccine for anything else or any other treatment. But
yeah, I think they're just taking it as, hey, this is assumed this happens after getting the vaccine, so that's why it's fine.
Right, and using it against the Omicron XBB 1.5, they're showing that the difference, one being no difference, and it almost crosses the unity, but it's a little higher. But we don't have that circulating. Now we take this, let's see, prescribed success relative, what is this? Oh, yeah. Look at what they have here. They say, see, the pre-specified success. We had pre-specified success criteria was met. Non-inferiority success criteria met. We met it. The criteria was it is not more than 10% worse.
They did this with many newer vaccines that they said, let's just prove that it's not inferior. Well, and then we would assume that everything else that was the benefit from the previous one is carry over.
But they're saying 10% less is our standard. So if it's less, but not more than 10% less effective, it still passes. And they're talking about its success. And you and I might say 0. Is it less effective? If it's less effective, why would we do it? And you can see a large part of the error bar is below 0. But since they specified that they were only aiming for it to be worse, but up to 10% worse was okay.
Did they present a reason for why they are trying to make a new vaccine? Is it more cost effective, or it is more stable, or is it?
My bet is that they're thinking that the rejection rate of this one is too high. And if they can say you only have 20% as much going in, they'll have greater acceptance.
I see. So dose reduction, which may be cost reduction as well. I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
Profit boost for the people making it, would be my bet. And here we have the relative effect of the efficacy based on age. And you can see 12 to 17, it doesn't even meet their minus 10%. It's 29% less effective for the 12 to 17.
Mm-hmm.
And just barely in the 18 to 64, and the low end here doesn't meet their 10% criteria either for over 65. So even though they were planning for failure, they didn't meet it except for one age group.
Mm.
They wouldn't like the way I presented it, but okay. Now, relative efficacy versus severe COVID. This is where I think they played with the definition of severe anyway. So we have all participants, and again, our 0 is here, and we just barely squeeze over our perhaps 10% less effective.
So is the 95% confidence passing through the Unity?
Yeah. Pass
So,
through 0 relative efficacy. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
They only have 55 cases. It's a small study.
Yeah.
And to be fair, what tends to happen when you increase the number, the center stays the same and the error bars get closer.
Mm.
And so there may be a good reason for the initial study to declare success that way. There may be a good science reason. What I'd really like to know is, what have they done with other vaccines? And when they look at other things, is this really just playing with this one, or is this a standard appropriate technique? And I don't know enough to know if this is a standard appropriate thing.
Understood.
And here it says it has the potential to further reduce the burden, particularly among those vulnerable to severe outcomes. And again, this definition of which diseases were in or out may be impacting this recommendation.
Mm.
I left the rest of the slide off, but that was their public health benefit they had for that.
Mm.
Now, a different thing, they compared COVID-19 to influenza. And we had done that a while ago. So
I had done that. That was a very interesting numbers to compare.
So here are their numbers, and they're comparing influenza in the last year and COVID for the whole time. Okay. And here are my calculations. First, this is reproducing their numbers. And it's influenza from 2024, 2025, COVID for the whole time. And if we take a look and just per illness and take a look at what's going on, it turns out that there's 18% of the number of influenza are COVID, or 5.5 times as many people got influenza as COVID. Influenza in a year versus COVID overall. Now, if we take a look at the outpatient, and let's take and divide the outpatient by the illness they reported, hospitalization and death. So these are all divided per illness they have. They're saying of the people who get COVID, 22% become outpatients, where 45% of those who get influenza are outpatients. Now, I don't know about you, but when I got COVID and when I get the flu, I don't go see a doctor. So I guess I'm in the zero above the 22 and 45. But they say 3.6% are hospitalized, where only 1.5% of the flu victims are hospitalized, and 0.3. And if you look at the deaths, the death rate here. Wait a second. Yeah, the death rate says that 0.31% of those who get COVID die, and 0.12% of those who get flu. So if we look at the relative risk, dividing these two together, we can say that over the whole COVID, only, let's see, this was 3% got, 3% of the people who got the flu got COVID. And if you got COVID or the flu, if you got COVID, it was half the rate of being an outpatient, or twice the rate, depending on which way you're looking, 50% or twice the rate. So more people go into the outpatient if you have flu. 5 times as many get hospitalized. So we have a 250% or 40%, depending which way you're looking at it, but 2.5 times as many people who get infected with COVID end up going to the hospital, and 260% die compared to the influenza. So the hospitalization and deaths look like they're pretty much tracking. And so COVID goes along and you get less and fewer people go and complain about it. But then when something serious happens, it's about 2.5 times. And if you remember, when I did the study, we had between 2 and 3 times. So, and COVID is getting less and less deadly, where the flu has already settled down to what it's going to do long term. So any questions or comments about that?
No, so far so good.
Here's the weekly rate of COVID and hospitalizations. Okay, these are based on percent. These are above 65. January makes a big difference. Maybe everyone gets together for the holidays and they give people COVID. I don't know. It doesn't show up for anybody else. It's just a gradual up and down for it. And you can see the rates are very, very low, and the over 65 have most of the COVID. This is October 24 to March 25. So maybe a virtual Christmas would be a good thing if you have a older person who is at risk or you're worried about what they'll do for COVID. And here's the provisional. Again, apparently they haven't finalized any of this data, including the 2021, or they're keeping it all provisional so they can compare it, which would make sense, but over the various years. And you can see, just as we're saying, the current year is lower than any of the other years, and then COVID's becoming less and less and less deadly as time goes by. Not every single month is lower, but it's generally tending to do that. Significant reduction. So you really wouldn't want to go back to last year on any of the years. Now, if we take a look at the weekly deaths of hospitalization by season, you can see the various years. And here, this came way down. I'm convinced this is down because it was so high and so many people were immune. And so this downturn is just a reflection of more and more people weren't getting the new variant, or because they had just been hit so hard with the so many of them with the prior variant. And so this curve probably, if this peak wasn't so high, this valley wouldn't be so high, is my estimate. And you can see, we see the same thing, the coming down and down. And if we take a look here, this is blown up. This just this section right here, blown larger. And you can see it looks like it's about flat, but not quite. It's heading down just a little bit more. And so there's something going on with March. March seems to be lower initially in here. So, maybe this was a reflection. Here we had a peak too. We had a peak that came up and a peak. These were flatter. And so maybe this downturn in March is a reflection of the up peak we have here. I don't know. That's really guessing. But the bottom line is the number is coming down and it's continuing to come down. And these are the hospitalizations. Okay, now let me quickly in one slide review what I normally would do for the whole stat discussion. Here we go. These are the 4 things with the infection, the hospitalization here, deaths, and you can see the curves are all pretty much the same and all heading down. This is the sewage. Number is coming down. Here it is blown up. You can see it's still going down a little bit. We haven't hit a bottom, but you can see hitting this parallel. These are all down. This one's up a little bit. This one hasn't quite reached the bottom. And so we still have the downward sloping upper peaks, and the bottoms the troughs seem to be about the same. They suggested it's in the low category. If you remember, we said it was good last time. They eliminated their 10 categories and went to 5. Here we go. This is the current variants. They have two that are growing. They have this little one right here. See the purple one and the orange one. There's the purple one. There's the orange one. These are the two that they suggested for the vaccines. And you can see there's several generations removed, but they're a predecessor of both. Here's the rate of changes going on, the mutations, and you can see it looks pretty flat, a lot flatter than it had before. This is the average going up. It jumps up and then it's fairly flat and jumps up and fairly flat. We're seeing the same sort of thing. I don't show you the number here, but the number is a little less than 40, which is what it's been for quite some time. Conclusions. It's just the same as before. It's not over. It's still dangerous for some, a little bit for all of us, a little dangerous for all of us, continuing to change. The effect is slowly decreasing, slowly, and it seemed to be well behaved, not doing exciting things.
Understood.
So if we want to go back and take a look at quickly, as a summary, here's right here, if you want to type this into the thing, here is the web page right there.
ACIP meetings agendas.html. Thank you. Got
Right.
it.
And when you go down, you pick 2025, and then they have the draft meeting agendas and PDF, and that's where the presentations are in there. And those are the presentations we had. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, all condensed. And again, the recommendations they had, they did not have a recommendation of doing anything other than continuing. This was their slide of what caused additional severity. This is the estimate of people with at least one condition that puts them at higher risk. And you can see the 74%, and the youngsters are higher than the others. This is the respiratory virus hospitalizations, COVID versus influenza. This is the total number of deaths, almost all old people, 50, then 65 is the vast majority. From 23 to August of 24, we're not counting any this year. There are a lot fewer, so that may be a reason not to update it. Influenza deaths compared to for the various ages. The infection induced rate in September to December of 21 and 22. And much, much higher than anyone was told. The population for the number of exposures of combined vaccinations and infections, long COVID, incidence of long COVID going down, their vaccination versus unvaccination. And we talked about how there was a different group they were looking at. Here they're doing their long COVID or the multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children over time. Going down, the adverse reflection, the virus shows that they are, if they want to exclude everyone, they're doing a good job and nothing gets verified and reported. Here they made a mistake, including children receiving one, the number or something. They have 6 categories rather than 5, just another gross error. Here they're showing that they believe, they're looks like they're still suffering from the idea that they get to get in between a doctor and their patient, that they want to allow someone to get a vaccine, which is a approved medication. Here we're looking at the efficacy, 60%. Here, 60%, 60%. Here, the low number of people getting vaccinated. Here, the adults, the other was everybody, and just a little higher, but it's below 20%. Here's the new vaccine. We're trying to figure out what it is. And I think Mobeen came up with a good explanation. They're putting a lot, about 1/20th of the dose in. And so it would have about 10% of the receptor binding domain if that's causing trouble, because again, it's you've got the two groups and they're each about half. And if it's 20%, then if you had a response to receptor binding domain, it should be about 1/10 as much. And hopefully you don't get an equal or worse problem with the other one that they linked with their 7 amino acid flexible link. Here we're talking about adverse effects they were having as they tested it. And we still have that 7% were medically attended in the group that was done. It may be that these were people in the study group and that they had to have more than the medical attention that would occur in general. But I still think having, 0.2 and 0.3% of serious side effects and 7% of people looked at by doctors is not a medication I would want to take unless I was severely needing it. And I don't know that we are, but that's just my decision. Here again, we're showing that very, very close to no distinction, but it might be the small group that they have. Here they're crossing 0, but they said, we defined that if it was 10% less, that's good enough. Again, it could be that it's a small test group and that's appropriate. Don't know. Here again, just showing the 0 and that they all cross 0 for every age group, even though somehow when they pulled it all together, they were better. So anyway, here we have the 0 again. This is for severe prevention of severe COVID, how well it works. And it's, again, the error range crosses unity. This is where they're saying they didn't find that it has a potential to further reduce the burden of COVID-19, particularly among the most vulnerable, which are probably the old folks like me. Here we have the comparison of influenza and COVID. Those are the numbers. And 3% of the people that get the flu get COVID. Half of the number of people that go to the hospital. The hospitalization rate, if you get it, is half for COVID as for the flu. But the chance of being hospitalized and dying is about 2.5 times, which is precisely what we guessed and estimated from numbers that we pulled together before. Here are the weekly deaths going down. Here, that was hospitalization deaths, and this hospitalization's going down. You can see that it's about leveled off, but hasn't quite. And then we have all the data here that we normally do. It's pretty much the same. New variant coming in. It's responding just the same way. We're getting the virulence is measured by the water effluent is going down. It's cycling, and we're almost down, but it's maybe a little higher on the low end, but the upper end is coming down. Here are the two that are currently dominating, and here are the two that they were talking about for the vaccine this year. And that's the summary.
Thank you so much. 1 hour and 19 minutes we took of yours and the audiences. Thank you very much for watching. And Paul, thank you very much for putting it all together. I saw that Faraz was saying that, did you change your mind from the everything is as is? Faraz, there was some new data. So if you watch the video again, there was some new data that was in the CDC slides for the previous years. So Paul was presenting that new data is interesting, and we had never seen that before. Cool. So with this, Paul, thank you very much. And Cool Beans, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.